You're not here because you're lost. You're here because something in your life has quietly stopped fitting. Not falling apart, just too small. And if you're Aquarius, or you carry Aquarius energy, this moment isn't random. It's the moment when thinking a little bigger no longer works, because your nervous system knows your timeline is about to change. After February, you don't need motivation. You need permission to stop negotiating with the life you already know you're meant to live. If this already feels personal, leave a comment and say, "I'm ready." That's how this message knows it found you. And stay with me, because what's coming next isn't inspiration. It's the blueprint for what happens when you finally think big enough for your future to catch up. It's subtle, isn't it? That quiet shift inside your chest, not excitement, not fear either. More like a recognition that doesn't need proof. You've felt this before. Late at night, or in the middle of an ordinary afternoon when nothing was wrong, yet something felt unfinished. For someone like you, Aquarius, life has never been about chasing happiness the way others do. You've always been more interested in meaning, in patterns, in what's unfolding beneath the surface of things. That's why moments like this don't arrive as chaos. They arrive as stillness, a soft realization that the life you're living isn't broken. It's simply no longer aligned with the version of you that's been quietly evolving. You've done what was asked of you. You showed up. You learned the lessons. You survived the years that reshaped you in ways no one else fully saw. And now, there's this gentle pressure, not pushing you forward, just standing there, waiting. It's the pressure of untapped capacity. You know that feeling. When you walk into a room and instantly sense what's unsaid. When you see possibilities others dismiss as unrealistic. When you feel responsible not in a heavy way but in a sacred way for something you haven't named yet. That's Aquarius energy when it matures. It stops needing to be understood and starts needing to be honored. You may have noticed lately that conversations feel thinner. Not wrong, just incomplete. People talk about routines, about keeping things safe, about staying within lines that once made sense. And you listen, you smile, but something in you has already stepped beyond that edge. Not out of rebellion, out of clarity. There's a loneliness that comes with that clarity, a quiet one. The kind that doesn't ache, it hums. It's the loneliness of someone whose inner world has grown faster than their outer life. And here's the part no one tells you. This phase isn't about adding more. It's about letting go of the inner negotiations. The ones where you tell yourself maybe later, maybe next year, maybe when things feel safer. Your nervous system already knows what your mind is still circling. Staying where you are would require shrinking something essential. So let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you felt fully met by the life you're living? Not just grateful for it, but expanded by it. You don't need to answer out loud. Just notice what your body does when you hear that question. Because this moment you're in right now isn't about tearing anything down. It's about listening closely enough to hear where the future is already calling you from. And if you stay with me a little longer, we'll begin to illuminate why this calling feels heavier and brighter than anything you've felt before. Not as a prediction, as a remembering. There's a certain calm that settles in once you stop trying to explain yourself. It doesn't arrive suddenly. It comes quietly. Almost like a long breath your body has been holding for years finally letting go. You've probably noticed it. That moment when you no longer feel the need to adjust your words to fit the room. When you listen more than you speak, not out of shyness, but because you're already listening to something deeper. That's when you begin to recognize the signature of who you are. Aquarius doesn't move through life by emotion alone. You move through understanding, through perspective, through an inner map that's always scanning what's next, even while your feet are standing firmly in the present. You've never been fully comfortable living only in what is. Your mind naturally leans toward what could be, not as fantasy but as probability. You read the undercurrents. You sense where things are heading long before others feel the shift. And because of that, you've spent much of your life feeling slightly misaligned with timing. Too ahead, too conceptual, too focused on long-term meaning when others were focused on immediate comfort. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's precisely why you've struggled to feel fully mirrored by the world around you. People often mistake your distance for detachment, but the truth is, you feel deeply. You just don't lead with emotion, you lead with clarity. And clarity can feel lonely. Because once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you understand how a system works, it becomes impossible to pretend it doesn't need to evolve. Once you've mentally stepped into a future version of yourself, your body quietly refuses to stay confined to the old shape of your life. That resistance you've been feeling lately, the subtle discomfort, the sense that something is off, even when things look fine on the surface. That isn't dissatisfaction. It's intelligence. It's the part of you that was designed to move humanity forward, even in small, personal ways. Through ideas. Through innovation. Through living as an example of what's possible when someone refuses to settle for a life that lacks meaning. And yes, that kind of mind can feel isolating. Not because you're meant to be alone, but because you're meant to lead quietly. You weren't built to blend in. You were built to observe, to question, to gently disrupt what no longer serves growth. So let me ask you something, just between us. When you imagine the next chapter of your life, not what's expected of you, not what feels safe, but what feels honest, does it scare you because it's unrealistic, or because it asks you to finally trust yourself? There's a difference. And somewhere deep inside, you already know which one it is. Stay with that knowing, because the more you honor it, the clearer everything else begins to feel. And as that clarity sharpens, something else starts to awaken, a deeper relationship with your own direction, one that no longer needs approval to move forward. And that's where things begin to quietly change. There's a different kind of pressure you start to feel at this point in life. Not the kind that crushes you, the kind that wakes you up. It doesn't shout, it sits quietly behind your ribs. A steady reminder that you're standing in a space you've already outgrown. You're not struggling because life is hard. You're struggling because life has become too familiar. You've learned how to survive, how to rebuild after things fell apart, how to carry responsibility with grace, even when no one noticed how heavy it was. That chapter shaped you, but it isn't meant to contain you forever. For someone like you, small thinking once felt responsible, safe, even wise. But now it feels different in your body. It feels like restraint. You can sense it when you make decisions that keep everything manageable, predictable, controlled. Your mind may agree, but your energy pulls back, because thinking small at this stage isn't humility anymore. It's self-protection disguised as logic. And you've never been someone who was meant to live from fear, even subtle fear. Thinking bigger doesn't mean chasing unrealistic dreams or abandoning what matters. It means being honest about the capacity you've already developed. You didn't come this far to plateau. You didn't learn all these lessons just to stay comfortable. You didn't refine your perspective, your discipline, your intuition, simply to keep yourself busy. There's a deeper truth you've been circling for a while now, one you may not have said out loud. Your current goals don't challenge who you've become. They fit the version of you from years ago, the one who was still proving something, still stabilizing, still healing in survival mode. But you're not that person anymore. And the quiet tension you feel isn't impatience, it's readiness. The kind that shows up when your inner world has expanded faster than your outer life. When your ideas stretch beyond the containers you've built for them. When your future keeps tapping on your shoulder, asking you to look just a little further ahead. You may notice yourself hesitating at that edge. Not because you doubt your ability, but because you know that once you think bigger, there's no going back to pretending less will satisfy you. So let me ask you something gently. When you imagine a life that truly matches your intelligence, your insight, your depth, does it intimidate you or does it feel like relief? That question matters, because fear and excitement often feel similar in the body. But one contracts you, the other expands you. And expansion, even when it's uncomfortable, is familiar territory for you. You've always grown through stretching beyond what was expected, beyond what felt reasonable at the time, beyond what others could immediately understand. This moment is no different. You're not being asked to rush. You're being invited to stop negotiating with what you already know. And as that realization settles, something inside you begins to reorganize quietly. Priorities shift. Desires sharpen. Your sense of direction grows clearer without forcing anything. Stay with that feeling. Because once you allow yourself to think at the scale your future requires, everything else starts adjusting to meet you there. And that's when the real movement begins. There's a quiet relief that comes when you finally name what you've been carrying. Not out loud, just to yourself. Because for a long time you thought something was wrong with you for feeling this way. This constant sense of pressure beneath the surface. This feeling that rest never quite feels like rest. But the truth is, what you're carrying isn't anxiety, it's purpose. And purpose, when it's real, has weight. It's not the kind of thing you pick up when you're bored. It doesn't show up as a side project or a casual interest. It arrives slowly, shaping you through years of experience, loss, learning, and quiet endurance. You didn't ask for it. You grew into it. That's why it doesn't feel light. You've lived enough life to know this isn't about ambition or ego. It's about responsibility of a different kind. A responsibility to the version of you who stayed standing when life tried to compress you into something smaller. The one who kept thinking when it would have been easier to numb out. The one who kept observing when it would have been safer to conform. The one who refused to disappear, even when no one was watching. That version of you didn't survive all of that just to exist quietly. And somewhere inside you know it. That's why you feel restless even on good days. Even when things are stable. Even when there's nothing obvious to fix. It's not ingratitude, it's misalignment. You can appreciate what you've built and still feel the weight of what remains unused. Those two truths can live in the same body. Aquarius energy matures through responsibility to vision. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that asks for integrity. You're aware, maybe more than you admit, that what you see, what you understand, what you're capable of, carries consequence. If you don't use it, something essential goes dormant. And when that happens, the body feels it. As tension. As heaviness. As a quiet grief that doesn't have a clear source. But here's the part that brings relief. This weight isn't a burden meant to exhaust you. It's a signal meant to guide you. Purpose feels heavy because it's meant to ground you. To anchor you to what actually matters when the noise of the world grows loud. To keep you from drifting into a life that looks fine but feels empty. And you've probably noticed something else. When you move even slightly in the direction of what feels true, the weight shifts. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes steadier. More focused. Less draining. That's how you know you're listening to the right thing. So let me ask you something softly. If this sense of responsibility wasn't something to escape, but something to honor, what would you stop avoiding? There's no rush to answer. Just notice what rises when you sit with the question. Because this heaviness you've been carrying isn't asking you to do more. It's asking you to stop pretending you were meant to do less. And as you allow that truth to settle, a different kind of strength begins to surface. Not forceful. Not urgent. Just steady. The kind that knows exactly why it's here. There's a moment that arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, when you look around and realize the room feels different. Not empty. Just quieter. The conversations don't reach you the way they used to. The laughter sounds familiar, but it no longer pulls you in. And it's not sadness you feel. It's distance. Not emotional distance. Energetic distance. You didn't push anyone away. You didn't do anything wrong. You simply stopped vibrating at the same speed. When your inner world begins to reorganize, the outer world follows slowly. And for someone like you, that often means fewer voices around you, not more. This can be confusing at first, especially if you've spent much of your life being the listener, the observer, the one who bridges worlds. But eventually, you start to notice something important. The quiet isn't empty. It's intentional. People who build their lives around comfort don't always recognize someone who builds their life around vision. And people who need certainty often feel unsettled around someone who trusts what they can't yet explain. So the space grows, not as rejection, but as refinement. This phase isn't asking you to isolate yourself from the world. It's asking you to listen more closely to yourself. Silence has a way of sharpening perception. Without the constant feedback of other people's expectations, your own direction becomes clearer. Your intuition speaks in a steadier voice. Your thoughts feel less interrupted. And in that stillness, you begin to notice how much of your energy used to be spent translating yourself, softening your ideas, making your vision more digestible, explaining why you see things the way you do. Now, there's less need for that, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started trusting your internal compass more than external validation. This kind of solitude isn't meant to last forever. It's an initiation, a necessary pause before movement, a recalibration before momentum. Every meaningful shift requires a season where the noise drops away, just long enough for you to hear what direction your life wants to take next. You may feel moments of loneliness here, that's human. But beneath it, there's something else quietly forming. A deeper relationship with your own presence. A sense of groundedness that doesn't rely on being understood in order to move forward. And there's a subtle confidence that begins to grow. Not the loud kind. The calm kind. The kind that comes from knowing you're not drifting. You're aligning. So let me ask you something gently. If this quieter season wasn't something to rush through, but something to receive, what might it be preparing you for? There's no pressure to answer. Just notice what surfaces. Because this space around you isn't emptiness. It's room. Room for clarity. Room for discernment. Room for the next version of your life to take shape without interference. And as you settle into that understanding, something else begins to shift inside you. A readiness. A steadiness. Not to withdraw from the world, but to re-enter it differently. With intention, with vision, with a sense of timing that feels unmistakably your own. And when that moment comes, you'll recognize it. There's a feeling that begins to build after a long period of quiet. Not urgency, not impatience. More like the air shifting before a storm you can sense but not yet see. You've been recalibrating without even trying to. Your body knows it. Your sleep patterns change. Your attention sharpens. You start noticing what drains you faster than before, and what nourishes you more deeply. Nothing dramatic on the surface, but internally something is lining up. This is how momentum forms for someone like you. Not through sudden chaos, but through alignment. January has been doing its quiet work, clearing static, reorganizing priorities, helping you feel your own rhythm again, instead of forcing yourself into one that no longer fits. You may have felt moments of stillness that were almost uncomfortable, moments where nothing seemed to be happening. But beneath that stillness, you were resetting your internal compass. And then comes the pivot. Not as a date circled on a calendar, not as a prediction written in the stars, but as a shift you feel in your posture toward your own life. After this point, something tangible begins to move. It might arrive as a decision you can no longer postpone, one that feels calm, not dramatic, obvious, not impulsive. Or it might appear as an opportunity that doesn't need convincing. It simply fits. The timing feels clean. Your body says yes before your mind finishes analyzing it. Or maybe it shows up as a doorway you didn't even realize you'd been standing in front of. One that opens not because the world changed, but because you finally stopped arguing with yourself about walking through it. This is how timelines actually shift. Not because the universe suddenly chooses you, but because you choose to move in the direction your awareness has been pointing all along. For Aquarius, change isn't reckless. It's intentional. You don't leap without vision. You step forward when your inner logic and your intuition finally agree. And when that happens, movement feels inevitable. You'll notice how quickly things respond once you're no longer sending mixed signals. How conversations align, how resources appear, how your energy stops leaking into places that no longer require your attention. It's not magic, it's coherence. The future begins to recognize you when you start recognizing yourself in it. So let me ask you something, quietly. If you trusted that the next step would meet you halfway, what decision would become simpler right now? You don't need to rush toward an answer. Just notice what softens when you ask. Because anticipation doesn't have to be anxious. It can be grounded, steady, rooted in the knowing that you've done the internal work required for the next chapter to hold. And as this sense of readiness settles in, something else becomes clear. You're no longer waiting for permission. You're no longer waiting for certainty. You're waiting for alignment. And alignment has a way of arriving exactly when you're prepared to move without resistance. Stay present with that feeling. Because once momentum begins, it carries you forward more gently than you expect. And the path ahead starts revealing itself one honest step at a time. There's a quiet shift that happens once you stop waiting for everything to feel flawless. You can feel it in the way your shoulders drop, in the way your breath settles lower in your body, in the way you stop rehearsing who you need to be before you begin. For a long time, you were taught that excellence meant perfection, that if something wasn't ready, it wasn't worthy, that you had to arrive polished, certain, complete. But that system was built for a different version of you, one who needed approval to move forward, one who measured progress by how little space there was for error. You've outgrown that operating system. What actually moves your life now isn't perfection, it's presence. It's the willingness to show up as you are on the days when your energy feels uneven. It's choosing to continue even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. It's trusting that motion itself is a form of intelligence. Relentlessness for you doesn't look aggressive, it looks steady. It looks like returning to what matters again and again without drama, like creating even when the work feels incomplete, like taking one honest step instead of waiting for the perfect plan to appear. You've already proven your discipline. You've already proven your resilience. You don't need to prove anything anymore. This chapter is asking for something more subtle. Permission. Permission to let progress be imperfect. Permission to let effort count even when it's quiet. Permission to build a life that evolves in real time instead of staying frozen until it feels safe to reveal. And there's a relief in that, isn't there? A softness that doesn't weaken you, it steadies you. Because burnout doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from doing everything while denying your own humanity. You're learning a different rhythm now, one where consistency is rooted in care, not pressure. Where discipline supports your nervous system instead of overriding it. And as you practice this new way of moving, something changes in how you relate to time. You stop racing it, you stop fearing it, you begin working with it. The days don't feel as heavy, the decisions don't require as much force. Your energy stops leaking into self-judgment and starts returning to creation. This is what empowerment feels like when it's sustainable. Not loud, not urgent, but deeply rooted. So let me ask you something, just between us. If you allowed yourself to continue without needing to be perfect, what would you finally give yourself permission to begin? Notice how your body responds to that question.
Not your thoughts, your body.
Because your body already knows the pace that will carry you forward without breaking you. And as you align with that pace, your life begins to reflect it. Not all at once, but steadily, reliably. You're no longer trying to become someone else. You're allowing yourself to function as who you already are. And from that place, momentum doesn't exhaust you. It supports you. The path ahead doesn't require you to push harder. It invites you to stay present, committed, and kind to yourself as you move. And that's when progress becomes inevitable. There's a calm that settles in when everything finally starts to make sense. Not in a dramatic way. Not like a sudden revelation. More like the feeling you get when you step back and realize the road you've been walking has been shaping you all along. You don't need a map anymore. You recognize the terrain. What you're building now isn't an escape from the life you had. It's an evolution of it. All the years you spent observing, questioning, refining your inner world, they weren't delays. They were preparation. You've been learning how to think beyond what feels immediately safe. How to stand in your truth without shrinking it for comfort. How to trust the intelligence that has guided you through every transition, even when the path wasn't clear. This is what the blueprint actually looks like in real life. Not instructions. Alignment. You stop asking yourself how to fit your vision into the world as it is. And instead, you begin shaping your world to reflect who you've become. There's a grounded confidence in that. A steadiness that doesn't need to announce itself. You're no longer trying to be understood by everyone. You're more interested in being honest with yourself. And that honesty changes how you move, how you choose, how you build. The life ahead of you isn't about excess. It's about coherence. Your work, your relationships, your environment, they begin to mirror the expansion that's already happened inside you. You may notice how patience replaces urgency, how clarity replaces pressure, how trust replaces doubt, not because doubt disappears, but because it no longer runs the show. There's a deep relief in realizing you're not behind. You never were. You're simply early to a way of living that values insight over noise, meaning over momentum, integrity over performance. And when the world begins to meet you there, it doesn't feel overwhelming. It feels natural, like recognition moving in both directions. You don't need to rush the outcome. You're already living inside the alignment that creates it. So let me ask you one last thing quietly. If you fully trusted that your timing was intentional, how gently would you allow yourself to move from here? Sit with that. Because this isn't about reaching a finish line. It's about continuing from a place that finally feels like home. Thinking bigger now isn't about wanting more. It's about refusing to deny what you already are. And as you walk forward with that understanding, something subtle but powerful unfolds. The world doesn't need to be convinced. It begins to respond. One connection, one decision, one moment of recognition at a time. You're not late. You're not unrealistic. You've simply been ahead, learning how to carry the future with care. And now, you're ready to live it. And before we close this space together, I want you to pause for just a moment. Not to analyze, not to plan, just to feel. Feel how different your body feels now compared to when you first pressed play. That's not imagination, that's alignment. Because when an Aquarius hears truth, it doesn't land in the head first. It settles in the chest, it steadies the breath. It reminds you of something you never actually forgot. You were never meant to rush this journey, you were meant to recognize it. And if something in you softened tonight, if something clicked into place quietly, that's your signal. Not to change everything overnight, but to trust yourself a little more tomorrow than you did yesterday. This path you're on, it isn't loud, it isn't dramatic, but it's real. And real paths have a way of revealing themselves one honest step at a time. If this message spoke to you, leave a comment below and simply write, "I trust myself, not for me, for you." And if you're ready to continue this journey with others who think deeply, feel quietly, and move intentionally, subscribe and stay close. This channel isn't about predictions, it's about presence. About remembering who you are when the noise fades. There are more messages coming. Different tones, different layers, each one meeting you exactly where you are. The journey doesn't end here, it deepens. So take this moment with you, carry it gently into your life. And remember, thinking bigger isn't about wanting more. It's about finally honoring what's always been true. Until next time, Aquarius, stay awake, stay kind to yourself, and keep trusting the intelligence that's guiding you forward.